Okay, so I was in the middle of just trying to look at where this end event is documented, but I didn't find it um, yet. What's this? This is HTTPS page. I think there's more information on HTTP page about the events. There we go. Response dot. And no, this is for calling the end of a response. So this is for generating that end of response, but I'm actually want to consume the event for response end. Event close, event finish. And the response has been sent. No, it's about sending stuff. Anyway, I won't spend any more time on that. Basically, I just managed to get that right. I would be, if I couldn't figure out what the event was, I'd probably be Googling it. HTTP request, response finished, something like that. That just takes me to, let's see. Someone's asking about the body of the response. So that would probably get us the info. On data. Anyway, as I said, I'll leave that for now and just go on with trying to make this thing work. So what have we got so far? Well, we've got a little program that fetches this specific URL and it will, so it sends off a request for that, gets back a response, stitches together the data that it gets back, and then it just logs it to the console at the end. So that's not too bad. I'm just going to break that up a little bit just to make it a little more readable. So basically, at the end, I'm going to take this function, cut that out, and put it down here. And let's call this handle response. Let's say handle data. That's a pretty generic name, but that'll do for now. The idea is I want to name things something that I'll know what it means later, and ideally that other people will also know what it means. You can't count on remembering what you called it, when you called something. Maybe handle complete data because that's more useful. So now I'm dealing with some data, and I could even pull this one out, but I don't think I really need to do that. I'll leave this in here just so that I can see that I'm actually getting something back in case I break something. But now basically we've got this function running in there, so now that I've got my get happening where I fetch the URL, and then I've got this thing here which will handle it afterwards, so that's a bit easier to follow. Actually, I think this data no, it's not available to that, or is it? I think if I were to declare that inline, just verify that I haven't broken anything. Let's just log the length instead, so I don't flood the output. Good. Let's clear screen 2 to get that stuff out of the way. Now I'm thinking maybe if I put this inside here, in Sublime Text I'm just holding Control Shift and pressing down to move that line down. I'm not sure whether that will work because of the scope of data. Where I'm defining this function, this data probably doesn't exist. Press up a couple of times to get the right one. And yeah, so data is not defined. Whereas if I had that inline there, let's temporarily paste that in there, it might be defined. Yes, it is. So I might leave that inline like that. Just indentation right. But then instead of, I'll still have this function handle complete data here that takes data as an argument. That can have that logging line in it, which is just representing doing something with the data. And now this won't get the same name, but that one will basically just call handle complete data with this data, which will be the one that's in this scope here. So that should work. Yep, so that appears to be not throwing any errors, so data must be defined properly. And we're getting length here, which should be the sum of those. What have we got? These are each about 15,000, so 30, 60, a bit thousand, that looks about right. Cool. Okay, so now here I can handle my data, and up here separately I have some code that's actually fetching the data. So I'll probably split these into separate modules at some point, but for now I'm just getting things working. So next thing I want to do is look at what the data actually is. I might create a commit there actually. I'd usually use Git on the command line, but I'm not a big fan of the Windows command line compared to Linux, so I find that I can do most things with this GUI application of GitHub. I wonder if I can zoom on that. No, it doesn't let me. Anyway, I've got some uncommitted changes. Should be able to see what those are. Just expand those. Apparently it thinks I've changed these files. Oh, I guess I haven't made any commits yet. So what I might do is just make a commit with those initial files that it created. And now I've got a change with just this index file. I usually like to go over what the changes are that I'm committing, because it's easy to sort of add little bits and pieces of messy stuff that you forget about, like just logging things while developing that you actually want to remove from the final product before you share that code with anyone. But this will do for now. So basically, let's say add program. Let's add index.js. Fetches the URL and prints the response length. Let's keep that short and just say hard-coded URL and prints. There we go. It tells me what I've got so far. Now if I'm looking back at that later, I can see that. I'm going to open a Git shell just to quickly show something that I often do. It seems to be running slowly today. So often I would, let's say, list those. Got API doc fetch fetcher, and usually I'd do something like git k. That gives me a GUI with a list of my commits, so I can see if things have branched off and merged back together. It's in reverse chronological order, but that's a handy way to sort of review what's happened so far. That'll become more interesting as I make more commits. So now I've got unsynced commits. So what I'm going to do is publish. That sounds good. Publish to the server. I think GitHub for Windows will automatically create a project on the server for me. I can actually check that. I'll just jump into GitHub. That's my own account. And see if there's a repository there. There it is. API doc fetcher. And I think I can add a license file easily. Plus if I name it license.md, it lets me just chuck a license on there, and I'll just put an MIT license in that. And let's put in the current year. There we go. And that's good. New file. So now there's a license in there, which is a permissive license. That means you can just grab this and do whatever you want with it, because I really don't have any interest in restricting how people use that code. I'll just sync that to pull down that license change into my repository so that I don't get any conflicts later. Not that I would, since it's a there we go, since that license. I wouldn't get any conflicts because it's a separate file. But anyway, where was I? So I'm getting some data back. I've created a commit. Now I want to try and do something with the data. So I want to have a look at what shape our data is there. So I'm going to jump to this page. So this is the actual web page that it's downloading. And I might just try and grab this summary if I can. So first thing I'm going to do is inspect that. Let's make that bigger. So this is Chrome. If you're using Firefox, it might be a little different. If you're using Internet Explorer, then I recommend you use Chrome or Firefox. Although I haven't looked at what the DevTools are like in Internet Explorer, if they exist. So basically that description is what I was talking about. That's what I want. And I can see up here it's got a summary H2. So basically what I want is really the paragraph after this summary, or everything between this and the next one. But for now I'll just make it the paragraph after that. So I can see this has an ID, capital S summary, which is, that's good, that's very specific, that means it's the only one of those on the page. So that's what I want to grab. I'll just make a quick note of that. So I want to get ID summary. Get paragraph after hash summary. So in there's a CSS selector syntax. A hash means it's the ID of something. Or if you do it dot, it would mean class name summary. So it's just a way to refer to things on a HTML page. So basically I've got this data. It is HTML page, so I need to figure out how to parse HTML in Node.js. If I was in the browser, the JavaScript was running in the browser, then I could just access the DOM directly. But on the server side of Node, there's no DOM. So I have to do something, either get something that'll build up a DOM for me, or just something that can find something in the HTML page. So Node.js plus HTML on server, that looks good. It's talking about simple web server, and actually here's one from Max Ogden, and Max Ogden does a bunch of cool stuff, so I'm going to have a look at that one. To give an idea of the kind of cool stuff Max Ogden does, he's I think he and Substack were largely responsible for making this. I think that's him there. So it's basically a Minecraft in the browser kind of thing, which I think is really awesome. Anyway, that's a tangent. So this is a blog post talking about scraping, so that's getting data out of web pages. HTML parsing with Node.js, that looks like exactly what I want. So it can take a while to read through that. But here we go. He's using Cheerio. Jumping straight to code examples sometimes gets things done faster. So he's bringing Cheerio in. Built on top of a HTML parser. Implementing the jQuery API. So jQuery lets you use CSS selectors to access elements of a HTML page. Doesn't need to make a DOM. Cool. So let's try this. I'm just going to grab this. Pretty much. Let's chuck that over there. Zoom in a bit so it's easier to see on the video. So here's basically what I'm trying to do. I'm bringing in the Cheerio module. Now, this one I probably will need to download some code for because it's not a core Node library. And now this is basically assigning a variable called $$ to Cheerio.load and a string. So if I do Cheerio.load with that data, that should give me, let's call ours $$ as well. And now that's setting some things. I don't know how to pull something out of it. I'm going to do it with FS. Logging some text out of something. That looks like basically what I want to do. And it looks like it's using a callback pattern to map some function across whatever you get back. So let's try that one. So we've got our $, and let's use $, and get that hash summary. And map a function across it. So HBAR function. And this takes I and I guess an element. And assume I is just the index, so if you're on the third one it will be 0, 1, 2, so 2. And let's just log the element just to see what it looks like. Throw error. Cannot find module Cheerio. So I want to use npm to install. Actually, before I do that, I haven't made this a node project yet. I can use npm init to make it into a node project, and it just has a few. So it's asking me what I want to name it. API.fetcher is fine. Version 000 sounds good. Description. I already entered a description. Someone else. Thought. No, maybe I didn't. Anyway, command line program. Fetch pieces of API documentation. Looks good. Entry point index.js sounds good. Test command. Add that later. It knows where Git repository is because it's Git. And I won't add any keywords. Just set my email address as the author. And the license is MIT. That looks fine. Okay, so now I have a package.json file. Just here, that's what npm init creates. So that is telling npm about, well, it will be telling it about what modules I need. So I'll just create a quick commit out of that. So I've got that. I've got those commits. Won't include index package.json, so git init. That's what I did there. And save that stuff for a minute. Now that I have a node module, I can npm init install Cheerio. Save. And save will give me. So that's downloading that module, and adding save on there makes it store it in my package.json. So that should be now a difference in package.json dependencies. Cheerio, looks like I've got version 0.17, and that all worked properly. So now I should have Cheerio. So now if I run that again, it'll have the code that it needs, and that's printed out something interesting. So we have a JavaScript object being output. So obviously I want to put a bit more code in there to get this reference. So basically this object it gives isn't just a string. So I need to wrap it in Cheerio again. That's using Cheerio. I think that. That should give me a Cheerio version of it. It's 25 minutes again, so I'll just finish up what I'm doing here and then cut to another video. So that's wrapping it back into a Cheerio object and then getting text out of it. Should be roughly what I'm doing. And I want to log that. let's try to pull the text out of that element. Error, not found. Get address info. That looks like it didn't find the address. I'm going to run that again because maybe it's just a network issue. Nope. That worked. Okay, so right. So this makes a parsed version of that data, and then using that lets it access that element. So this thing must have data about the position within the document of it, or something. Cool. So that's printed out summary, which is not quite what I want. What I want is something after it, the paragraph after it. So what I'm going to do is, this documentation said that it implements a lot of the jQuery APIs, so next sibling. So next, get the immediately following sibling of each element in the set. So that's good. So I might just try adding that. Summary.next. And I'm hopeful that'll grab the thing afterwards. And that looks right. That looks like the description on the page that we wanted. So that's pretty good. That's probably a good place to commit that. So I'll just open GitHub, and it should have those changes that I made. Just give it a minute to load. So this should have index.js. Computer's running very slow today. What's your problem? It's one of the advantages of command line over GUI. Command line tends to be more stable. Oh, that's why. It's got a whole lot of stuff in there that it was parsing. So this is everything that got pulled in when I installed ran npm install with the Cheerio module, but I don't want to include that. So actually I want to add that to my git ignore. I want to ignore the whole node modules folder because I don't want to be checking any of that stuff in. So I don't know why it's decided that we should have Eclipse and Visual Studio. I guess just that's what GitHub for Windows decides. So I'll just add my own stuff above here, what I actually want, which is, so git ignore is a file that tells Git that anything that looks like the following should not be counted for source control. So that should now be rechecking based on that change I've made, and it'll come up with a much smaller list. I could also just uncheck each of these, but I'd have to do that every single time, so I don't want to do that. There we go. So now git ignore has been updated, and I might even just make that its own commit. Add node modules. just ignore. It's useful. And now package.json's been updated just to add that Cheerio. HTML. Just providing a bit of info. There, so that if someone doesn't know what the Cheerio module is, they don't have to go and dig around to find all the information. And now I'll check that in. So this is basically my previous thing I did was really adding index.js, which fetches a URL, so I was already doing that. So extract summary paragraph from web page. Might as well add a bit more verbose stuff. Paragraph after the summary heading. Displays it on the console. So there we go. So that's pretty good now. We've got a basic working program, but this is really just a prototype. It doesn't have any flexibility. It's not very useful if it's just going to print this out. I could have just done console.log that text. So now it's probably time to start thinking about how to get some flexibility in here, how to maybe specify a different location or maybe just a different part of the page to extract. But I'll cut the video there and take a short break and then resume after that.